corporate manager, speaker, author, and entrepreneur with a passion for helping millennials build thriving careers, and has spoken to groups of executives and young professionals at top companies. Please welcome Mr. Aaron McDaniel.
Being a millennial myself, I'm a little different than a lot of my peers who like to come up and tout how amazing the millennials are. I kind of tell it like it is. So there's a number of things that are issues with millennials that we'll talk about that we have to overcome. So does this look familiar to anybody? One person does 99% of the work. One person has no idea what's going on the entire time. One says he's going to help and doesn't. And then the other disappears at the beginning and doesn't show up. It's about typical, right? So one piece of advice I like to give you guys is, when you're interviewing a millennial or talking to them, there's a lot of we's that get shared because there's so much group work. So drilling down to say, what did you specifically do will really tell you. To make a similar, I'll label it mistake, that was made in the household in the corporate environment. So in the household, millennials became entitled because the whole world revolved around them and they were being recognized for everything. We remember what our refrigerators look like, right? And often what companies are doing now is they're saying, we need to change our cultures and our images and do all of these big things at a high level to make sure we're attractive to millennials and we retain them. And while those things are still important, the gap is the actual individual millennial themselves. Because as I mentioned, there's no class that teaches us how to be successful in a corporate environment. There's a lot of these lessons and expectations and things that millennials don't understand. One thing I like to talk about working with companies, I call it the Gen Y ROI. And I found a lot of my peers, they'll stay at a company for 11 months, 13 months, and move on to the next thing. And I'm very keen to that because I don't want to train someone and put a whole lot into them to have them go somewhere else, right? So it's an issue. Loyalty. 26% of millennials think 7 months on the job is being loyal. A little different than the 5 years for baby boomers, right? What happens with those particular traits, the impatience and entitlement, is it creates this lack of resilience, right? Because we expect instant gratification, and we expect that we deserve things. And so if we don't get them right away, we kind of give up. Sometimes leaders work in mysterious ways to teach us. If Daniel's son was a millennial, he would have left after paying the fines. So as I was referencing before, finding the right way to explain the why behind something will go a long way in empowering a millennial. Anything you can do to make it self-service is very attractive to millennials as well. If there's something that we can do where we don't have to interact with a person, or we don't have to make a phone call, or we don't have to go into a store or a branch location, that's particularly important. And my instinctual response was, I'm just a sales manager. And Chris just jumped down my throat. He said, just a sales manager? You're not just anything. And he was right. I was a little taken aback, but that type of mentality of what I do really doesn't matter. You know, it's just I'm a cog in a big system, and there's no impact that I have. You know, that mentality within me led me to put in suboptimal work, right? I wasn't as passionate, I wasn't taking as much pride in my work, and I wasn't performing the way I should have because, again, I thought that what I was doing really didn't matter. Chris ended up going on stage and speaking, did a great job, and he was signing books afterwards, so I went out to get a book signed, and he said, who's this for? And I said, oh, it's for me. And he said, perfect, I'm going to sign this to Not Just. That's my nickname for you from now on. So I kind of laughed and laughed, and actually 2-3 months later, I got a call one evening from my dad, and sometimes he likes to brag of who he drove around that day or what star it was because his clientele was pretty high end. And I wasn't really in the mood, so I was like, I don't know, just tell me who it was. And he said it was Chris Gardner. And so my dad started to tell Chris that story of the conference, the AT&T conference, and Chris totally cut him off and said, wait, you're not just that, aren't you? And so I leave you with the message of making sure that you share with your future leaders of your organization that what they are doing matters, and find ways to give them impact, even if it's in a small way. Because they don't necessarily need to have that corner office or a big title or a bunch of people working for them to be leaders. So, thank you very much.
Well, I think the management process is difficult because we have such a mix of all levels?
So what I talk about in my management book is what I call the contingency method. So it's basically certain foundational management skills and things that you do, but then depending on the situation, whether it's a growth scenario or a turnaround or clean up an organization and the individuals involved, you change your management style. So what I have found to be successful for me is I don't stand over people, and in part this is because I'm a younger person managing either my peers or someone older, but I don't stand and say, I am your boss, you have to listen to what I say. It's more like, I want to help you get your job done. What can I do? And then say, here are the expectations and hold them to that. Every person I've ever had to fire, it never was a surprise. They knew long time going in, they were apologizing to me that they didn't set the expectation, that they didn't meet the expectation that we set and worked through together.